Hey guys, and welcome to a video on why so many high-level players, streamers, and content creators have been quitting the game recently, as well as why that is a worse thing for Black Desert than normal games. So, what this video is essentially going to focus on is the casual and hardcore divide in Black Desert. Black Desert has a much higher casual to hardcore ratio than in other games. Black Desert Casuals make up the majority of the game in Black Desert. So casuals in most games are players that do not reach endgame or do not participate in endgame content. In World of Warcraft, it would be players that don't do mythics or raids. In Destiny 2, players that don't partake in strikes or raids. In Black Desert, it's only really PvP. It's players that do not participate in high-level PvE, such as the highest tier stuff like Giffen or Histria, or players that don't participate in node wars and sieges, particularly higher level node wars, not just tier 1s. So, because of that, the number of casuals in Black Desert is actually much higher than in other games, because it's so difficult to become a hardcore player in Black Desert that even players that would be considered hardcore in pretty much any other game, spending multiple hours a day playing Black Desert, are considered to be fairly casual when compared to actual hardcore or high-level players in Black Desert. Relative to other hardcore players, Black Desert players are some of the most hardcore players I have ever really met in any MMO I've played, with the possible exception of MapleStory and Old School RuneScape, as both games have numbers of players at the top end that play ridiculous amounts of time. Black Desert is pretty similar, and because of that, casual players make up the vast majority of Black Desert's player base, even more so than other games. For reference, most games have a fairly high casual player base. Destiny and Destiny 2, we can actually see sort of the numbers because of trophies on PlayStation or Xbox achievements. We know that almost half of players that purchase the game don't even finish the game. They don't even finish the fairly nominal and short campaign, and instead just kind of drop the game at some point between level 1 and max level. Only about 10% of players actually finish the raid, and only about 20% finish most of the higher end content. But when you extrapolate that to players that actually participate in activities that could lead to end games, like after getting to max level, it's 20% and 40%, which isn't too bad. It means you've got about 50 to 60% of the players that are active are probably casuals. In Black Desert, that number is probably much higher, as most players are considered casual because getting soft cap is so difficult, and soft cap is really what you need to not be considered fairly bad or casual in Black Desert. Casual, it's kind of taken on a new meaning since its inception as a word, so I'm going to be using it not just for people that play the game casually, like less than an hour a night, but also for people that don't play the game as competitively or aren't able to be as competitive as other players. Those are also going to be lumped in with casuals. So normally this wouldn't be too huge a problem. We know that casuals, having lots of casuals is pretty good for a game because it fills up the game world. It lets the hardcore players sort of show off their hardcore skills and stuff to other players, lesser beings in a way of speaking, and it allows for more income and revenue as casual players do spend quite a bit of money on the game. However, Black Desert is not like the other games or other MMOs, as Black Desert is essentially a freemium game, which means it relies on a small set of players who purchase a vast majority of the microtransactions, in other words, whales. Different from World of Warcraft, Destiny 2, Guild Wars 2, EverQuest, most other MMOs, where players have already paid a large amount of money and thus the developers don't care if they remain at level 1 forevermore. In Black Desert, the developers want players to continue playing the game after spending the $5, at most $10 to purchase it, and spend money on pets, on weight, inventory, or even on outfits and possibly tons of outfits that they could melt for cronstones. If players only purchase the base game for $5 or $10 and then never purchase anything else but continue playing the game and taxing the servers, that is not what Cacao and Pearl Abyss actually want. And thus, having more casual players in a game like Black Desert isn't necessarily great. Casual players do purchase microtransactions. In fact, in a lot of games, casual players will purchase more than a hardcore player, because in lots of games, most microtransactions are usually cosmetic in nature. League of Legends, for example, some of the players I've played with the biggest cosmetic collections, so skin collections, are bronze or silver. They're not very competitive. They just kind of play the game to have fun, but they have like every skin for a good number of champions, and they've got skins for most other champions that they play as well. But Black Desert, most of the items in the Pearl Shop are designed to cater more towards hardcore players. There are stuff such as outfits and pets, but for casual players, these are usually one-time purchases. A casual player doesn't need tier 3 or tier 4 pets. They'll usually stick to maybe 1 or 2 pets that are really cute that they like. They'll buy a single outfit, but they don't really need too many outfits. At most, they'll buy a couple outfits of the same class, which in Black Desert is very expensive. But the high prices of outfits also drive away casual players from purchasing outfits for their favorite character, and especially from purchasing outfits for characters that they don't play as often. So because of this fact that Black Desert is kind of a freemium game, they rely even more on the hardcore players, which is what their cash shop, the Pearl Shop, caters to, in order to fund the game. Which is one of the main reasons that the casual-hardcore divide is concerning for Pearl Abyss and Cacao. What it means is that when creating content, they have decided whether to cater to the casual player base, which probably won't be able to play most new content, such as Dragon, because the gear requirements are just way too high for most players to actually participate in the new stuff, or to cater to existing players, so casuals, but to kind of tell hardcore players that, yeah, there's not much here for you, you can explore it, but it's not really going to help you with increasing your gear level or giving you new stuff to grind for. Normally, you want to cater to the large portion of players, the players that can play everything, and thus focus on stuff such as the leveling experience and dungeons, and make the raid really cool, but also kind of focus more on other stuff, such as in World of Warcraft. Raid is usually really cool, there's a lot of time put into it, but there's also a lot of cool dungeons that normal players can explore. There's lots of little leveling stuff, there's PvP, there's all this other stuff they can do. In Black Desert, there's not so much that they usually add apart from new life skill stuff when they introduce new continents or new regions. It's mostly just, here's a couple more monsters to kill, there's no dungeons in the game, there's no new PvP modes, it's just, here's new monsters. There's not even new nodes anymore because Kama Sylvia and Dragon do not have nodes to fight over in node wars and sieges. So, developing, in most games, you develop for the big player base. In Black Desert, generally they develop for the hardcore player base because that's the people that will be spending money to foray into the new content. Now, back to sort of the purpose for this video. In the last month or two, a lot of high-level players, as well as streamers and content creators, have been quitting the game. Going back a little further, the biggest name of anyone that's quit is Lacari. But just in the past month, for anyone that pays attention to streams, for anyone that watches YouTube videos for Black Desert, a lot of the video creators, such as myself, have been making less videos, and some have even stopped making videos altogether. I know Dungeoneers, for example, has quit Black Desert for the foreseeable future and gone on to start playing other games. The Twitch section is extremely devoid of streamers. It used to have a decent amount. Now there's only a small handful that stream regularly. A lot of the content creators that are still there are making less videos and making less guides, or they're sort of paying attention to other games for now. And this is bad in Black Desert because in Black Desert, the content creators are usually more on the hardcore side. Yes, there are players like myself and Dungeoneers who are a little lower level. For example, I've got mostly tri-boss gear with a small number of tets, whereas Dungeoneers is actually fairly low level and thus caters more to new players. But for the most part, content creators and streamers in Black Desert are very high level players, and hardcore players are generally fairly indicative of how a game is doing. In most games, hardcore players are usually the last to go. Usually casual players are the first to quit when a game has sort of controversial updates or big problems with bugs or hackers, as they don't really feel too tied down to the game. They're more fair weather fans, and if they're not having fun playing Destiny, they'll go play Overwatch. If they're not having fun playing Overwatch, they'll play Fortnite. Whatever they feel like playing, they'll play. Hardcore players generally stick around until things get so bad that they cannot keep playing the game, and thus they quit. Hardcore players are usually sort of the metric, the wind chimes for if a game is so bad that the hardcore players are quitting, the game is really, really bad. But in Black Desert, it's often the other way around. Hardcore players are often the first to quit. Because most of the changes to the game affect primarily the hardcore players, casual players don't really need to worry too much. Taking the recent Cronstone, so melting outfits for Cronstones as an example, casual players don't really need to worry too much about this affecting their gameplay. If you're at 400 to 450 gear score, someone going from 540 to 560 gear score because they bought some outfits, melted them to Cronstones, and advanced their gear, it doesn't affect you. They were going to one-shot you at 540, they're still going to one-shot you at 560. Nothing changed. The 540 might be able to move up to Tier 3 Node Wars now from Tier 2, or depends on what they're doing, but they could go to better grind spots. But in all likelihood, if the 450 runs into that player, no matter what they were doing, they were going to lose at 5 when that player was at 540. It doesn't change how the casual player enjoys the game. The players that have the amazing gear are going to defeat them whether or not they've paid to win for even better amazing gear or not. It's not going to change how that affects their gameplay. The only small change it might have is that if it gets so cheap to make amazing gear that more and more players start to do it, then a casual player might get affected if that starts to infringe on the casual player's sort of area of play. If most casual players farm in Medea and early Valencia, and enough players are paying to win that these areas get flooded by players with really good gear, that would affect casual players. But that hasn't happened in Black Desert yet. The new Node War changes that a lot of players are annoyed about, that doesn't really affect casual players either. It affects Tier 1 guilds, Tier 1 Node War guilds, but most casual players don't even do Node Wars. When I speak to a lot of players that identify themselves as casual or just not super interested in gearing up and advancing, they don't do Node Wars. They just hang out with their guild and life skill or grind when they feel like it. So most of the changes made in Black Desert don't affect casual players that much, and as a result, hardcore players are often the first to quit in Black Desert. So what I'm kind of getting at here is high-level players, streamers, and content creators are quitting because the changes that Pearl Abyss are making to the game don't necessarily affect casual players, but they affect the hardcore players. A lot of people have been saying that the game is dying recently. A lot of people on Reddit and the forums have been up in arms, talking about how pay-to-win has destroyed the game or is destroying the game, and that people are quitting. But it's not actually the case for the average player. The game is still chugging along just fine if you play, ignore most Node Wars, and ignore high-level zones, or don't really pay attention to streamers or content creators. There's not much that's actually changed in most patches. Kaffir stones drop now, so casual players can actually try and earn tets slowly, but after a few months you'll probably get 1 or 2. And really the benefits of the recent patches are actually pretty good for casual players. It's only the hardcore players that are affected. And while hardcore players are important to most games, like for Black Desert, they really need to hope that casual players start buying stuff, or that hardcore players purchase even more stuff to make up for the ones that are quitting. But hardcore players are not the be-all and end-all of the game. Just because hardcore players are the ones that are often the vocal minority, they're often the ones talking about the game, and they're often the ones that are very outspoken in their criticism of the game, does not mean that the game itself is in a sort of a bad place. Now, the game is in a bad place if you want to play the game competitively, unless you have a lot of money, in which case the game's in a great place. But for most players, the game's in a pretty good place right now. Now, the other thing is that I kind of want to mention in this video, Kakao, and kind of by extension Pearl Abyss, as Kakao has recently alluded to the fact that Pearl Abyss forces them to make these changes to the game even when they don't want to, have a very ingenious way of sort of implementing pay-to-win and new stuff into the game that pisses off hardcore players. They put it and bundle it with stuff that the players have been asking for a while. Example I'll be using is the Kron melting outfits for Kron, as that's the most recent, and also probably the best one they've ever done. But you can also see it with stuff such as Kama Sylvia and implementing the Blessing of Kama Sylv and stuff like that. They usually like to bundle it with stuff people have been asking for a while. I believe actually Blessing of Kama Sylvia came out just before the lawn did. So melting outfits for Cron Stones was implemented with the Caphras enhancement system, which has been asked for and very much awaited, a system that's been in Korea for months now. We've been wondering what would happen, and it finally happened, and they introduced the melting outfits for Cron Stones and Valk's Cry that's been available in Korea since launch with that update, saying that it was necessary to get players up to an average gear level where the Caphras enhancement system can be used, because it can only be used to get to Tet and Pen. Can it be used to get to Try? I don't think anyone would use it to get to Try anyways. Now, they did this, bundling with Caphras enhancement system, which was okay, but the big thing they did was they did it at the same time as a massive downturn of players was going to happen anyways. And that is because Monster Hunter World and Battle for Azeroth both released at around the same time, which was a week before the Caphras enhancement system went live. So these two games, as well as the fact that in the summer BDO usually loses players, means that they were expecting for less players to be on BDO anyways. They also released it around the same time as BDO Remastered, so they knew that this was going to be the biggest pay-to-win controversy the game had ever had since the value pack controversy in its first year. And as a result, they sort of waited for a huge confluence of factors to implement the Caphras enhancement system and bundle it with it, so that players that quit were kind of lost among the players that were quitting for a little while anyways to play Battle for Azeroth, which is now having problems of its own, so players are coming back, as well as to play Monster Hunter World, which it doesn't get old fast, but it's a game that doesn't have that long to play for most players. Most players will play it casually for a few weeks and then go back to their main games. And thus, players have already come back. The game is pretty much just where it was right before the Caphras enhancement system and the melting outfits of Cron Stones was added. And on the outside, it looks like nothing's happened. Really, it's only the hardcore players that quit, because these are the players that are pissed off. Casual players, they're just fine. So, sort of end the video before I ramble on for too long. If you're a casual player, the game is in a great spot right now. There's lots of outfits on the on the marketplace. There's lots of stuff to do. You can continue to level up. You can continue to grind. You can continue to get better gear. Nothing's really changing. Nothing has really affected how you will be playing the game. For players that want to be hardcore, or for hardcore players, the game is not in a great spot right now. Lots of hardcore players are quitting. Sure, there's still lots of guilds with soft cap players. I believe Snake is the only guild in North America that has a full guild of soft cap players. But there's still plenty of guilds with soft cap players in them. But as more hardcore players quit the game, effects will start to be noticed, such as less content being created for the game, less people streaming the game, and less new players come in to fill the void, and less players joining the game for what the game offers, which is, for most players, PvP in an open world and large-scale settings. For most casual players, they don't really care too much about that, but for players that want to join the game because it's one of the only games in the marketplace that offers that, that is going to be something that slowly diminishes in value compared to what the rest of what the game has to offer, at least among the current player base. Anyways, guys, this is sort of an opinion video I've been wanting to make for a while. I've also got a video on pay to win in the works. Not sure when that'll be released, but should be soon. As always, subscribe if you liked the video. Comment below what you think. Do you think that more hardcore players have been quitting recently? Do you think I'm just sort of extrapolating from the wrong stats and that hardcore players have just been taking a break recently? Or do you think that the game is on a downswing and actually is dying, despite the fact that player base has stayed relatively the same for a while now? Anyways, comment below, and as always, have a good one.